Well, welcome to episode 40. So who would ever imagine that we would have even had that many episodes? But we all know the circumstances and how things go and the evolving of any sort of build, and this car's no different. But we're finally back off that frame where it was bolted to the floor and on the rotisserie, and I needed to do that to move forward. And I keep saying moving forward, and I feel like it's a slow process, but we are getting there. So what we're up to at the moment is to prep this underside so that I can get some epoxy on it so we can start urethaning gaps and filling where we need to. And the process is going to be between the rails, so just from here to here, through this centre section will be done with stone guard, and all of these little edges, the factory ones, because this is the FG floor here, so where that all seals, that'll be done with urethane. And then there'll be other bits and pieces like I've started here. And this is one of those things where I was doing the outside and I started doing it around a corner and I went, oh, I wonder how that'll look. So I've done a bit of filler there. And I've done that where I had good coverage of epoxy. So what I'm going to do today is get this in the booth, get all of this underside epoxied up now that we've cleaned it up, so that we can get that finalised. And at the same time, I've got a whole lot of stuff on the outside to epoxy and to get the first lot of high build primer on. So with what we've been doing here, to give you an idea, this is the range of tools that I've been using. And Darren and I had a pretty good day at it yesterday. So the normal 40 grit, so I like to use 40 grit on the flappers. And I've got some 40 grit just on that flat disc to get into some of the corners. And then the Scotch Brite on the grinder. These are really good as long as you stay away from the sharp edges. And then these tools, you can get them in air or in electric. Once again, 40 grit. And then the noisy die grinder makes it sound like we're at the dentist all day. But the die grinder with a whole range of tips. And if you're using these, get yourself a good brand, they last forever. If you buy the cheapies, they don't last at all. So all of those different tips we use to get in the different corners. And then the same applies with your files. Get a couple of decent files. So where you've got an edge like this, now we've put a bit of 3mm plate in there, and you can see here I've just done a little bit because it was up the other way yesterday. And just with a file, if you run that file along, and I won't make too much noise because it's horrible on the film, but to get that nice radius there, you really need a file rather than a grinder. You run a grinder along there and it won't be flat, and I'll do a little bit that Louise can get some footage of that in a minute. So all those edges, just trying to make everything good. The panel that covers this hole, and this has been, these were put in by the previous people that worked on the car. We've made these up, and we've made these to be able to run fuel lines and stuff through. And then they've got the covers that I showed you in one of the earlier episodes. So I've cleaned all those, the epoxy off of those now, because when we welded these in, these are where the bolts will go. Had a fair bit of warpage, so I'm going to have to do some heat shrinking. So I've taken all of that epoxy off of those, so that when I'm working the metal, it's a whole lot better than having the stinky paint and all with the heat on it. So they'll actually mount into there. And I just have sat that in there to show you. So they'll go in, I've got those bosses on the back, and that'll be the next job that'll happen. And that pretty much finalises the steel. And then if Louise, if you come up this way, this is a job that we haven't shown yet, that we've had to make the inner skirts. So because we've modified everything, nothing's going to fit from original. So Darren made those last week, and they're cleccoed in at the moment, but they'll be made so they can be screwed into place, you know, with some set screws. And then on this outer edge here, where that normally has, you know, a rubber strip, we'll trim that down to the right distance. I'm going to put some pinch weld with a rubber seal that will actually seal that off to stop the water and stuff going through into the A-pillar. So once again, they've been hand fabricated, and that sort of finalises the steel on the underside. So this rotisserie we've had for about 5 years now, I think, maybe a bit longer, and they really are a godsend. So this side now, you've seen that before, that's all blocked out ready now for epoxy, and then I'll wet on wet some high build primer. So I've just finished that off the last day or so, and I've got the roof done as well now. I just thought I'd quickly show a lot of people, I see questions on Facebook on all the different pages that I'm involved in about mounting. Now we've had quite a lot of Falcons on this, so we've made this plate up to mount onto the original bumper bar bracket, and that's got the supporting brackets and all inside, and we've made it so it detaches here more for convenience, but that's worked really well for us. I like to have enough room here that if I'm painting while it's on the rotisserie, I've got enough room to get a spray gun in, or if I'm blocking, because sometimes, you know, you make it too tight and then you can't get that access. So it's, if you're setting one up, that makes a difference. And I'll show you the brackets on the other end in a moment. Like I said, we've had this for a while. Some of the upgrades we've made is we put bigger wheels on it, because we roll it from here around into the spray booth. And with the rubber wheels rather than the steel wheels that came with it, it's a whole lot better. And the bigger the wheels are, especially if you're going to take the car, we often take them to the sandblaster. So if you're rolling them on and off of a tilt tray or into the blasters, these wheels are much better. And then up the front, having the drive set up on it really is a godsend. We've actually had to have it remade. It's a Chinese setup, and the gearing wasn't done very well. And I took it to an engineering firm, and they actually put some new bearings in it and made a new handle so that it tightens it up and makes it more functional. And then the brackets on the front, we're actually utilising just some heavy angle iron back up through to a bracket here. That enables me to, once the car's painted, I can actually repair that part that's all under the original bracket. If you use a factory Ford bracket to mount to here, you then can't get in to paint it tight enough. So once you get enough room to be able to paint things, and yeah, it works really well. got that back out of the booth now, pulled all the masking off. So if you're wondering why I'm sort of doing bits and pieces, what I've done now is I've put that epoxy urethane primer. So that's the VCP 150. So that's that green one we're using all the way through. So I've put that on, and then you can wet on wet with the primer. So I've put 3 coats of the high build on at the maximum build, so at just 0.5 thinners. And I've put 3 coats of that on here now. And the reason I want to get it on as soon as I can is I want to leave that to sit as long as I can before I block it out, because the longer it sits, then I've got a better chance of it staying flat, because it will shrink, and I don't have heating facilities. So, you know, if up at PPG when we do the actual paint work, they've got an infrared that makes a massive difference. But for me, if I can leave that a couple of weeks before I rub, it's going to make a big difference. And I'm really happy the way that some of this is looking now. So this is the side that I did a little bit of filler work in, got carried away and got started, but I'm really happy with the look of the way that's coming out now. So the advantage of being on a rotisserie is I can get all these back edges that are really hard if it's down on the ground, and the same along the bottom of the sills. So to get all these areas here nice, it's so much easier to do it when it's up on the rotisserie. I can have it at the height I want and work away at it, and it gives you a chance to look at lines and things that when it's down on the ground you just can't see properly. So the process now, we're going to finalise these the panels that go in here today, and then start cleaning up the edges and all with some filler on the underside. And part of the issue, I'll just roll that up and show you, part of the issue is that when we've been welding to the underside, so the seat braces and all tends to show, so I'll just put a light skim of filler through here and tidy up some of these areas, and then we're going to urethane all of the joints, the factory joints on the FG floor, and then get some stone guard on it. So I'm really happy the way that most of those lines have come out, and you can see there with the roof that that's starting to get some really good line. Really happy with my lines, really happy with this line, and we'll move forward now and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.